All right, let's continue the story from here. Today, the spotlight is on one project that's quietly been building strength while most people were distracted by noise: Zebec Network. Think of the market like a crowded railway station. Some trains arrive with loud horns and flashing lights, grabbing everyone's attention. Others pull in quietly, loading passengers steadily, preparing for a much longer journey. Zebec right now looks like that second train. For the past few months, the broader crypto market hasn't been running. It's been walking in circles. Prices have moved sideways, momentum has cooled off, and impatience has pushed many traders to look elsewhere. Zebec has been part of that same environment, moving inside a tight range, roughly between the lower zone near 0.023 and the upper area around 0.03. Now here's the interesting part about ranges like this. Sometimes, these zones are traps where price wastes time and energy. Other times, they're loading zones, where long-term positions are quietly built before expansion begins. If someone has been consistently averaging their entries throughout this entire area, not trying to time perfection, they're already in a strong position. And this is where perspective matters. If you genuinely believe a project has the potential to perform exceptionally well over an entire cycle, then the difference between buying at one exact price versus another becomes far less important. Yes, someone who bought higher won't get the same percentage returns as someone who bought lower. That's just math. But when you zoom out and think in terms of cycle-level moves, those differences shrink in importance. It's like boarding a long flight. Whether you sat down 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later doesn't change the destination. It just changes how long you waited at the gate. Now, let's rewind briefly to the start of January. That's when Zebec reminded the market that it's still very much alive. Price surged aggressively at one point, pushing close to a 50% move. That wasn't random. Early in that move, we saw a strong impulsive push, the kind that breaks hesitation. More importantly, price created a higher high, which is often the first signal that a market is attempting to change character. After that initial surge, price didn't collapse. Instead, it paused. It compressed. It formed a structure that looks far more like continuation than exhaustion. Yes, during that pause, there were moments where price printed lower highs and lower lows, something that usually makes people nervous. And that concern was valid. But the key condition was always clear. For this zone to resolve positively, price needed a decisive break upward, not a weak bounce, a real escape. That escape happened. Thursday and Friday delivered strong upside momentum, the kind of movement that forces people who were waiting on the sidelines to suddenly pay attention. Naturally, after such a push, some selling showed up. That's normal. Markets don't move in straight lines forever. What matters now is how price behaves around the weekly close. A strong weekly structure often sets the tone for what follows. Momentum doesn't need to be explosive. It just needs to remain controlled and constructive. When we zoom out and look at the bigger structure, something important becomes obvious. On higher time frames, Zebec is still trading at levels that many long-term investors would consider deep value territory. If you apply Fibonacci measurements across the broader move, price is sitting below levels that are historically associated with strong accumulation zones. These areas are where uncertainty is high, but opportunity often hides. Different analysts may draw these tools slightly differently, but the conclusion remains similar. Price is not extended. It's compressed. And here's a crucial point. We've already spent months at lower levels. The market has tested them, lived there, exhausted them. Going back significantly lower from here wouldn't just be a pullback. It would signal a serious breakdown in structure. That's not the scenario currently being suggested by price behavior. So, from a long-term viewpoint, the message is simple. This is not an overheated market. In fact, anything below 5 cents can reasonably be viewed as a discounted zone when thinking in terms of multi-month or cycle-based moves, not short-term speculation. Now let's talk about expansion. When markets move from consolidation into expansion, they don't usually stop halfway. Once momentum takes control, price often seeks levels that many people initially think are unrealistic. Historically, certain extension zones tend to act like magnets once a trend truly ignites. For Zebec, a move into the 2 to 2.5 cent region would not be surprising at all if expansion continues. These levels align with areas where many assets pause before deciding whether to accelerate further. Some will argue that it takes far more capital for price to move now than it did in earlier phases. That's true, but it's only half the story. Over the past several months, Zebec hasn't been standing still. Partnerships have expanded, visibility has improved, liquidity conditions across the broader market are gradually improving. When confidence returns, capital doesn't trickle, it rotates. And we've seen this rotation again and again. Money flows from Bitcoin into large caps, from large caps into mid caps, and eventually into smaller cap projects that have strong narratives and functioning ecosystems. When that happens, moves can become aggressive very quickly. Right now, Zebec sits around a few $100 million in market capitalization. A tenfold increase from here would place it in the low billions, a level that many projects have already reached in previous cycles. That kind of move is not extreme, it's not fantasy, it's within historical precedent. We've even seen large established coins post double-digit percentage gains in short periods. When momentum returns to the market as a whole, projects with smaller caps and growing adoption often move faster, sometimes far faster than people expect. If Zebec captures even a modest slice of incoming liquidity, price acceleration could surprise a lot of observers. Looking ahead, one of the next key regions to watch sits around the mid-cent levels. As price approaches those zones in the future, reactions will matter more than raw numbers. Psychological levels always attract attention, and they tend to test conviction. There will be pauses, there will be volatility. That's part of every strong trend. But based on current structure and long-term projections, moves toward higher single-digit cents are not unrealistic within a full cycle expansion. And beyond that, higher targets remain on the table if momentum, adoption, and market conditions align. What makes this especially interesting is that Zebec is still relatively early in terms of mainstream exposure. It's not listed everywhere. It hasn't been fully discovered by every major audience, and yet participation continues to grow. Holder counts are rising steadily, even during slower market days when interest typically fades. That kind of behavior often signals underlying confidence rather than hype-driven speculation. As of now, Zebec ranks solidly among active projects, showing consistent growth across multiple timeframes. Monthly performance is strong, weekly movement remains constructive, and daily trends reflect ongoing engagement. Fundamentally, the foundation looks stable. Structurally, price is behaving responsibly, and narratively, the project continues to position itself for broader attention. So here's the takeaway. Zebec doesn't look like a project that's finished its story. It looks like one that's still in the early chapters, quietly setting the stage while the crowd watches louder headlines elsewhere. When attention finally shifts, it rarely does so gradually. It changes fast. And when it does, the people who spent time understanding the structure, instead of chasing excitement, are usually the ones best prepared for what comes next. All content on this channel is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. Thanks for watching Coin News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for daily updates on crypto markets, price analysis, and breaking news. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update from the world of digital currency.